Hey guys, so today's video is a book video, and I actually been working on this for a while because I'm just like reading some books in between, but it's reading 5 romances so that I can feel something. I feel a lot, but it's a good title. So I read 5 romances recently that I've been actually really enjoying. I think these are a solid 4 to 5 stars, spoiler alert. Like, I think all of these are really good. If you want to read a good romance and you actually want to feel something, these are the romances I recommend. These are hyped romances that I read recently and I just wanted to feel something, so I hope you guys feel something too. These will be very quick reviews. I'll try to keep them as spoiler free as possible while also describing what the book is about, so let's just get into it. Subscribe with the bell, like, comment for engagement, and let's talk about romances. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Beach Read. 2 authors meet up in a childhood town that they used to both spend time in, like, as children, essentially. And they both went to college together, and there was a lot of miscommunication about, like, her thinking that he hates her because she writes romance, and he thinks it's, like, dumb because he doesn't believe in love. She was kind of into him, but because he kind of hates her. It's like miscommunication, but not done in, like, a really cringy way where you're like, okay guys, let's just get it together. This is embarrassing. Because they resolve it quite quickly, and, like, it's not such a hindrance that you're like, oh, just get to it, you know? Like, I think this is fine. Slight miscommunication, slight enemies to lovers, but nothing too crazy, nothing too cringe, nothing too like, Like, I think this is a great opposite to The On Honeymooners, which, as you guys know, I gave that 2 out of 5 stars. I just did not like that book at all. The miscommunication was bad. The enemies to lovers was bad. It was just not good, and no one was likable except for the main character. So this, if you guys didn't like The On Honeymooners and you had the same opinion as me, read Beach Read. It's so good. The enemies to lovers is done well. The slight miscommunication is done really well. The characters are likable. The plot is well developed. The setting is amazing. It's such a good vibe reading this book. It's a perfect summer read, and I actually gave this a 5 out of 5. It's my 5-star book. I think if you're going to read any romances, read Beach Read. However, we are getting into the autumnal season now, so I don't know if you guys read based on, like, mood, but if you're a mood reader, this might not be the mood for you, and you might want to leave it for, like, spring, summertime, but overall, it's an amazing book, so it's a 5 out of 5. Then we have Reminders of Him, which is such a good vibe. I actually really like Colleen Hoover books. I know that's a controversial take. Some people love it, some people hate it. I personally really like her writing. I like the plot twists. I like the heavy topics. I think it's perfect for autumn and winter. I don't think Colleen Hoover is a summertime read. It's not light, it's not airy, it's not vibey. The settings are very moody, it's very angsty, it's very Tumblr-esque. Now, going into autumn, winter, I'm reading so much more Colleen Hoover, and I'm just enjoying a lot more Colleen Hoover. So yeah, if you really like the, like, angsty reads, then this might be for you. So I read Reminders of Him. It's a great plot, but like always with Colleen Hoover, I really like it. I like the, like, slightly different vibes. It's not like a typical romance novel where you're like, I know where this is going. Kenna actually, and this is first chapter, this is not a spoiler, this is literally what the book is about. Kenna ends up getting into a car accident and killing her spouse, who turns out she was pregnant with. She survives, he dies, she gets a 5-year sentence. Obviously her child is now a toddler, but the parents of the spouse have custody over the kid. She comes back to the town looking to reconcile with her child. The parents are obviously really angry because their son died, and she ends up meeting accidentally her spouse's ex-best friend, who doesn't know who she is, and then finds out. So we have a slight enemies to lovers, as you guys can see. It's a really good book. It's a really heavy read, but it was really well written. I don't know what to tell you guys. It's slight enemies to lovers. It's a 4 out of 5 for me. It's just really good. I devour Colleen Hoover books. Like, I just get through them like nothing else. So I always give them a high rating. All Roads Lead Here is a book that I read recently, and Mariana Zapata has been kind of on my radar for a while. She's kind of like an underrated author for me. Like, you don't hear about her a lot unless someone's really ingrained in the romance scene. Like, unless someone's like an avid romance reader, they don't really talk about Mariana Zapata, but she's been mentioned a few times here and there. So I read All Roads Lead Here. It's about, well, the main character, she moves back to her hometown after divorcing her famous singer husband, who she was in a secret relationship with because he didn't want to ruin his career, and she was actually the songwriter behind all of his music. She ends up with, like, a bit of a settlement, a court settlement. She's got a bit of money. She moves back to her hometown because her mother actually passed away from hiking, like a hiking accident, and she's going through her mum's journals to see which hikes her mum really liked and to do them, and to live in the town that her mum really loved, and just to gain some of that, like, almost connection with her mum without her mum being there. And obviously she meets a guy. There is a bit of a, not miscommunication, a bit of a his son rents out a space that he wasn't allowed to rent out, and the father finds out about it, and that's kind of how it goes from there. It's literally in the first few chapters. So it's a very good like slight miscommunication trope. It's also very, very, very slow burn. There actually isn't any romantic contact until 65% of the book in, and I know that for a fact because I was reading it as an ebook, so it told me the percentage, and I actually checked it. I was like, I need to check because I need to tell everyone when the romance starts, and it's at 65%. So if you hate slow burn, you'll hate this book, but if you hate first, like love at first sight and like insta love, then this will be great for you, because other than being a romance, it's just a really well written book. The setting is great, the vibes are great. It's a super autumnal, wintry read because of all the hiking and like the nature and the whole thing. It's like a small town in Colorado. So like the vibes are just impeccable. But also the characters are so well developed, plot is well developed, and you learn more than just like the main couple. You learn about her friends and other people in the town and the kids, and like you get like a well-rounded story that isn't just love, kiss, have sex. Like it's like a very well-rounded book where you get a bunch more than just the romance. That's why the romance only comes in at like 65%, and then from there it kind of develops. It does have an ending. Well, they talk about something that I'm not really super into. It's nothing too crazy, but it's just not my favorite trope in a book. But because they mention it for a very, very tiny, tiny amount, I think it's just in the last chapter, I don't care. But if they had harped on about it for more than a few chapters, I would have been pissed. But yeah, I really liked it. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, but obviously on Goodreads, you can only do 4 or 5, so I gave it a 5 on Goodreads. But to me, it's like a 4.5. But it was fun. Then we have Normal People by Sally Rooney, which is a very controversial book. People either give it a 1 or a 5. People either never read it again or reread it all the time. I am a 5 kind of girly. Spoiler alert, I gave this book a 5 out of 5. I might reread it. And it's also the first book that I ever annotated, because I think there is a lot there to annotate. I'm not gonna force an annotation. It's miscommunication done right, which is what I love. When I did my like ranking book tropes, I put miscommunication really low down because I hate miscommunication, because a lot of the time authors don't know how to do it. And they do it in a way that is 1, unnecessary, 2, inconvenient, 3, a hindrance to the plot. If something is hindering the plot, I'm not just here for the characters, I'm actually here for the plot as well. So I like miscommunication when it's done well, and most of the time it isn't done well. This was done really well. They miscommunicate all the time, and you see the frustration and you feel the frustration, but you get why it's happening. They met when they were really young, they met at school. They're not good at communicating. That's like the whole thing. It's also a Friends with Benefits book, which I haven't seen in ever. I was gonna say in a long time. I think it's a good representation of modern day dating, and it's just done super, super well. It skips through time, so you're like going over a few years with them, and the ending of the book isn't the typical yay and they lived happily ever after. It is a really well done book. It's not forcing a happy ending for the sake of a happy ending, but it's also not doing an overly sad ending just for the sake of a sad ending. I think it's a really well done book start to finish. The characters are well fleshed out. The characters are flawed, but also very likable. They're just human. The miscommunication is done right. It's not a hindrance to the plot, but it's also a part of the plot. Like it actually moves the plot along. I just think it's really good. I don't know. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. And the last book that I read, and I actually finished it today, so it's still fresh in my mind, and it's It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. That was a mouthful. It's my favorite romance I've read by Colleen Hoover so far. Obviously Verity by Colleen Hoover is my favorite book overall, but it's not a romance. So Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us is my favorite romance that she's written. It's amazing representation for domestic abuse. Obviously, trigger warning, it talks about domestic abuse and describes it in great detail. So if that's not something you want to read, do not read. But it's a fantastic representation of domestic abuse and how trapping it is. And it's a representation of the shame that we put on women who stay in abusive relationships despite not understanding like the love that they feel. And obviously no one is abusive. Well, not many people are abusive 24/7. So the shaming of women that stay in a relationship, like I've even seen people give this book a lower rating because they don't like the she keeps on forgiving him. But that's literally how domestic abuse works. I think it's 85% of women go back to an abusive relationship. And I think this is a perfect representation of how trapping a relationship like that is, how much it's almost addicting. Like the dopamine rush of them being abusive, but then being really nice to you after that to make up to you is a dopamine rush. It can almost be compared to drugs. And I think this is done super well, super, super well. And if you find her forgiving him frustrating, maybe look inwards. I think this is super well done. And it's also a very personal book to Colleen Hoover because it's based on her mother's domestically abusive relationship. So it's a very personal book to Colleen. I think it's written really well. The characters are likable. Even the man who is the abuser, I think he's written in a way that is super, super, once again, well done. He's a likable character. You almost root for him sometimes. And then you catch yourself and you're like, no, he's abusive. And you catch yourself being trapped in this relationship as well, even though it's fictional and you're not actually in it. Because you're reading from her point of view, you're also feeling a bit trapped in it. And it's so well done. I think this is like her best book that she's written. And I haven't read all of her books, but I think this is her best book. A lot of people are saying that you're gonna like start sobbing. I didn't start crying when I think people thought I was gonna start crying, and I didn't cry at all, but I did tear up at the end. So just a little, you know. I hated the Ellen DeGeneres stuff. This is what gives the book a bad rep. Basically, as a plot device to go back to her past, she writes these journal entries, and they're written as letters to Ellen DeGeneres because she really likes the TV show. And the first paragraph of the journal entry is always about Ellen's show. So I would always just skip that one paragraph and skip Ellen's name and act like it's literally just a journal entry. I think this could have been done as just like diary entries. It didn't have to be an Ellen DeGeneres letter. And also, there is a plot at the end that normally I don't like, but in this book it was necessary. I think it actually moved the plot along, and there was something there to do with Ellen. I literally can't say anything, but I just think the Ellen slight like hintings just did not do it for me. I'm personally not a massive fan of Ellen DeGeneres, and I thought it was really cringy and like borderline millennial. Like it was giving millennial vibes. So I think we could have done without the Ellen stuff, but if you just skip the like paragraph where she talks about the TV show and you just go straight into the journal entry, you'll be fine. It's a 5 out of 5 for me, despite the Ellen stuff. Like I'm not gonna dock off any points for the Ellen DeGeneres stuff. It's a 5 out of 5 for me, and I think it's my favorite book out of all of these books that I read. 100%. I love this book. I think it's so good. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. What romance books have you read recently that you can recommend or not recommend? Be like, don't read these ones. Have you read any of these books? What do you think? Do you agree, disagree? And then subscribe with the bell, like, comment for engagement. I'll see you in my next one. Bye guys.